Warning, this video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and there's not a great deal to do. You know me, if there's not much to do, I don't like to pretend like we need to overanalyze or overtrade. Instead, I'm pretty much here just to say that I'm currently still looking for a Dalai Lama, okay? Until we make a new low, then we're still looking for this Dalai Lama pattern to play out. It is of note, as Bob points out here, that there's a chance Bitcoin has bottomed as of Monday and that we are going to make this Dalai Lama. But he personally would like one more good solid 2 to 4 day dump for Bitcoin to get right into the middle of that 60-day cycle low window and entirely cleanse the sentiment. For me, it's a pretty binary situation at the moment, right? All the while we are holding above that low for Bitcoin, then this is still a possibility. And of course, invalidation comes if we print a new low. So it's very, very simple. The good news is, even if we do print a new low, that should be a day 60 cycle low, as opposed to this current Dalai Lama, which puts us on day 54. Both are legal and qualifying. Both are inside the expected window. And all we can really do, like I said, is rather than pretend like there's work to do, just sit back, chill, let the price come to us, and we'll take it from there. Crypto El Prez here has pointed out that the RSI, okay, has gotten down to levels only seen 3 prior times this bull run. All 3 of these times actually coincided with daily cycle lows. And this one at the hard right edge today happens to be right in that timing window to see a daily cycle low. So all the prior ones were followed by higher daily cycle lows and Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things. Now keep in mind, the purpose of the daily cycle low is to flush the longs, destroy the sentiment, reset it, as I often say, and have everyone believing that the downside is just beginning. But of course, to the people that know about cycles, this is not really a time to be panicking. This is a time to be looking for, at minimum, a bounce to come in here. And all of this against a backdrop of negative funding rates, continued build-up of open interest, and massive liquidations sitting above. Of note for the open interest, there is a significantly higher skew to the short side in terms of short liquidations than there is long liquidations. So from a liquidation perspective, it makes more sense to move the price higher to liquidate the shorts than it does to see further downside here. And of course, the other thing that Crypto Prez points out here is all of this is occurring whilst fear and greed has shifted back to fear/neutral. So make of that what you will. I think until we have seen a few more days of price, until we know whether we've got a day 60 cycle low just about to show up or whether we've got a Dalai Lama in play, we can't really do much, okay? We just got to figure out which one of those 2 scenarios is in play first. And then once we're sure which one of these it is, whether we got a day 54 low with a Dalai Lama or a day 60 low with an incoming undercut, then at that point we can make some conclusions. Then we can say, okay, well, trade below that cycle low, and we've got a failed daily cycle. That implies bearish conditions, further downside. But all the while, once we've found that low, price is trading above it, then it's only reasonable to expect at least some more semi-bullish price action. And fitting in with this theme of fear and greed, 2 times this Bitcoin cycle, fear and greed has hit the 30-ish neighborhood, okay? And both those prior occurrences indicated the exact bottom before Bitcoin resumed doing Bitcoin things. Now today at the hard right edge, as you can see right here, okay, tells us to keep an open mind, again, about higher than expected Bitcoin prices, about not seeing the level of fear, panic, and huge drops that people are calling for, and instead to be looking for a daily cycle low to come in here. And then of course, once we've seen that, as I was saying, then we can make some decisions, right? Then we can have confidence based on future price action. I know a lot of people seem to get really frustrated with the idea of this left translated cycle. It seems to me that for many people, unless price is doing this in a straight line, then left translated cycle is invalidated. But I do think we're getting close, right? Now, this could easily take a number of weeks to resolve. We could certainly have that consolidation cycle, and we could, of course, have lower prices, okay? Anything and everything is on the table, as always, because it's a market. But I do very much like this count, and it aligns quite nicely with the whole idea of the left translated cycle anyway. So I do think we're getting close to this 3 into 4, whether we see that any day now, whether we've seen the low or whether there's a few more lows to make first. I do still think that this is really what we should be focusing on, okay? The 5th of the 5th of the 5th, that final leg to the upside. And it does seem to me that getting into this neighborhood now and panic selling is kind of missing the point, okay? This is, in theory, the last leg up, the most violent, the most near vertical angle of attack. And currently, everyone seems to be focusing on more downside, when really any more downside should in theory be the last and most significant dip buying opportunity we're going to get of this entire bull run. So I think eyes on the prize here is the motto, right? A few more K of downside is one thing, okay? But being able to take advantage of that dip, actually buying it instead of just assuming that this comes next, like most people on Twitter are calling for, is probably the strategy, right? This is the bit that we want to capture, because in theory, this is the bit that is the most violent, most explosive, and happens in the shortest amount of time. And as Cred points out, okay, similar deal. So whether we got the low or not, whether we've got to make a new low, whether we've got to chop around and maybe build a little range, at some point, we should be getting close to seeing this third and final angle come in. I watched Credible Crypto's YouTube video he put out yesterday or the day before, I think, and he was saying that his expectation is we see the top before October. And remember, he's arriving at these conclusions based on Elliott wave, and I'm arriving at a similar conclusion in that we are going to be a left translated cycle, which means any time before November. My expectation, of course, has been it will be slightly earlier than that. But notice how both cycle theory and Elliott wave counts are putting in a top before the halfway point of this cycle and thus qualifying it as left translated. So again, I see an awful lot of people laughing and mocking at this idea, and maybe that will turn out to be correct. But what I suggest is, instead of focusing your attention on mocking or discounting an idea, be open to both outcomes, okay? If this is what you think is happening, that's fine. Be short, but also be ready, okay, to potentially see the fifth come in. And if that's the case, then of course, have an invalidation level, have an area on the chart to manage the risk around, and make sure that you don't miss this, assuming it does indeed turn up, which I'm pretty sure it's going to. Over in traditional finance, hilarity ensues. Okay, the S&P is 1% below its all-time high, yet the NSYI stochastic is as oversold as during April 24 and October 23, which speaks, of course, to a hidden correction occurring underneath the main indices, which show massive strength driven by a few. So what we've actually got is this weird situation where the charts look very, very stretched, but under the hood, we're actually oversold, okay? That's incredibly strange. That's not very common, and at the same time, it's also very blow off top things. And so hence, we've got fear pertaining to the stock market, whilst we are sat just below the prior all-time highs. Markets tend to top on extreme greed, not on fear. And the way I'm interpreting this is that we've got oscillators resetting, ready for that third and final angle to continue explosively to the upside. And if we zoom in here, okay, look, you can see what I'm talking about. This is all the way at the levels that we're reaching today, except back in April, it corresponded with that weekly cycle low. The last time we saw levels this deep was October, and of course that corresponded with the prior weekly cycle low. So we are weekly cycle low resetting in terms of oscillators, with the price ready to go into orbit. A wild time to be alive indeed. And I love this from Jordan here, okay? We saw these new home sales come in minus 11.3% versus the expected minus 0.2%, okay? So that's a very, very, very significant change. And Jordan, of course, pointing out the most important part of all of this. Each day that passes with data such as this, and we keep seeing revision after revision in the jobs market. Remember, they keep releasing the jobs data only for a couple of weeks later them to come out and quietly revise it to the downside. They are creating the illusion that the labour market is in much better condition than it actually is. With revision after revision in the jobs market, it appears that when the Fed does actually cut, it's going to be into a slowdown and not into normalization. Remember, the markets can rally if we are cutting rates into normalization. But I've been making the case over and over and over again that it is not going to be a cut into normalization. It is going to be a cut because something has broken. And the reason that is so significant is because there's a big difference in 3, 6, and 12 months S&P 500 returns, depending on which one of these the cuts comes into. Does it come into normalization, in which case the market tends to rally, okay? But if it is not a cut into normalization, it's a cut because people keep losing their jobs, unemployment's getting out of control, and people are losing their homes as a result of not being able to service the debt at the higher interest rates, or losing their jobs, or people just unable to move house because they can't service the higher rate of interest, or new first-time buyers are also unable to get onto the property market due to the inflated house prices at the higher interest rates. Then it tells us when they do eventually cut, it's not going to be as part of normalization, okay? It's not going to be cutting because everything's back to normal, everything's fine, let's just gradually reduce the interest rates, keep this bull run going for a lot longer. Instead, it's more likely to be that something has broken, and as I keep saying over and over again, this whole thing for years now has reeked to me of a controlled demolition. So as ever, one day at a time, right? But I stand with this idea that we are going to see cuts sooner than people think, and it is indeed not going to be cuts into normalization. Instead, what we're going to see is something go bang and then be forced to cut to try to save the thing from going to zero. I've also been speculating it's not going to be able to be saved this time around. We are going to see a big deflationary bust. And part of the reason I think this is because the dollar is speaking. Okay, the dollar's still not breaking down. Now, we are currently something absurd, like a mere 21 days away from seeing the latest candidate for a 3-year cycle low. Okay, it could have been this one, it could have been this one, and it could be just a few weeks away now. But here's my issue, okay? To see a decline from here into that 3-year cycle low, okay, this is a very, very, very rapid drop for just a 3-week period. So I would assume at this point, it seems only reasonable to assume that that indeed was the cycle low, okay? And no matter how much I wanted to see this, okay, and that would have certainly fueled the blow off top, it seems unreasonable to me to say, I know what comes next, this, okay? That just doesn't seem reasonable to me. I think we're far too late in this weekly cycle. I therefore don't think that this is correct anymore, and I think we can indeed take this one off. You tell me what exactly would need to occur to see this happen in just 3 weeks. Of course, it's a market, anything can happen, but all the while we continue to trade up, okay? All the while we keep doing this, roughly approximating my arbitrary yellow squiggle at the top that has been there the whole time, it kind of makes me think that deflationary bust is really the thing, right? The stock market is blowing off, possibly found that half cycle low now, looking to resume higher, okay? If we start to make some kind of advancement, some kind of continued third angle being set here, then when this thing eventually does break, times are probably going to be pretty rough for a while. So as ever, not much to do, right? Not much to do apart from continue to observe. This should be the half cycle low. We should probably be expecting something like this, daily cycle low, and then we're going to find out. Same deal with the NASDAQ, right? And I've been saying that I wasn't really committed to this third angle just yet, but can we now use this as our new third and final angle? Maybe even be looking for a fourth to come in. I quite like that so far. I prefer to use the daily cycle lows to connect the line, but obviously we haven't got that far yet. The Dow Jones is more or less moving higher, so again, we're going to find out. And the Russell 2K just still hanging around this range, still can't quite break away. So that's going to be interesting to see if breadth does indeed widen. For now, nothing to report since all the way back in December, really. Also, notice Nvidia, okay? Because there was this narrative going on that Nvidia was carrying the stock market and that this really was the S&P 1 or the S&P 3. But notice how Nvidia's had this sell-off, okay? It's probably going to do something like this, I would think, and then go again. And it hasn't tanked the indexes. So I think that's of note. Meanwhile, the precious metals, okay, we're still patiently waiting here. We're around halfway through this daily cycle, I think. About 14 days, so we're over halfway through. Probably going to get a little bit of relief and then another rollover into what I hope would be about a day 24 daily cycle low somewhere in this neighborhood. And maybe that would form a weekly cycle, confirm with a breakout. And then, again, precious metals probably got a lot of upside over the coming months. And last but not least, Bitcoin. Let me get you a cleaner chart. So here's one with not much on it. If we zoom in on here, okay, is this currently in the making a Dalai Lama pattern? Could well be, right? And it could equally, as I was saying earlier, undercut this low, form a day 60 cycle low. We'll move this to here and then look to see what comes out of there. As I was saying earlier, not really any point in pretending like there's work to do, okay? Because there isn't. And for now, the other thing I think we need to keep an eye on is the bond market. Counter trend bounce here makes sense, okay? But start to accelerate to the downside. Same deal with the 2-year yield, okay? Little bit of counter trend bounce followed by a rollover. And again, it will be the bond yields signaling that these cuts are coming sooner than people realize. And as Jordan put earlier, this time around, it will not be cuts into normalization. Don't get it twisted, okay? Still seems like we got a third angle to come in here and arguably even a fourth at a later date. We've got to find the weekly cycle low, the daily cycle lows first. But overall, it's starting to look like it is indeed accelerating. And overall, again, I'm here to just simply say the only missing component is for Bitcoin to do Bitcoin things, just like we've seen back here from the Elliott wave counts. So what a wild time to be alive, frankly. What an absolutely wild time to be alive. If you made it this far, I've got a little treat for you, for the people with the long attention spans, for the people that are willing to put in the work. First, I want to read you this, and then I want to share a little bit of my own personal experience on this subject matter, okay? The average person believes the harder they work, the more money they'll make. Their linear thinking equates labor and effort with financial success. This is why most people are not rich. They're following an outdated model of success and are confounded when they reach middle age with little money to show for their 20 years of hard work. The rich know that creative thinking is the highest paid skill in the world. Independent creative thinking is the most valuable asset anyone can acquire. So while the masses are trying to figure out how to put their kids through college and retire on half of what they can barely exist on now, the great ones are building empires, living in abundance, and donating large sums to their favorite causes. This sets off a psychological domino effect because once a person thinks and lives at this level of abundance, they know that even greater levels of success are possible through the vehicle of creative thought. Most of us were told as kids that if we paid attention in school, got good grades, and went to a respectable college or university, our success was virtually guaranteed. The reality is, few people who follow this formula ever actually get rich. They survive and some become the most successful people in their families, but world-class wealth is rarely achieved by people that follow this model. The rich eventually figure out that training your mind to find solutions to difficult problems is the real secret to making money. The good news is, it's possible for anyone who conditions their mind to think in this way and then transforms thought into action. So the funny thing is, I've been thinking about making some kind of content on this subject for a while, and I've kind of just been pushing it away, even though my intuition and my gut instinct was saying you need to make some content on this. And then as of yesterday, I was scrolling through Twitter and I found this, and I just took it as a sign that, okay, let's share this. Let's share this experience. So I absolutely agree with this 100%. And if you are struggling or you're not reaching the level of abundance that you want to reach, I genuinely believe, and it is in my own personal experience, that changing your mindset will unlock more wealth for you in ways that you can't even conceive at the moment. And so I wanted to share with you a revolution I had some time ago, where I suddenly started to ask myself the question, why is it that people like doctors and lawyers don't drive Lamborghinis and Ferraris? Right? I started to ask myself this, and I appreciate this might seem silly at first, but hopefully you'll see when I'm done that I'm really just sharing a personal revelation I had, some personal experience I had, and I promise you it literally changed my entire life very soon thereafter. So the question is, why is it the doctors don't drive Lamborghinis, right? Now, in the UK, a doctor finishes 5 years of med school, okay, and then has to do about 5 years of training before they're considered properly qualified. And then at that point, they can choose a specialization. And assuming they become one of the high paid doctors, they can expect somewhere around 150k a year. Okay, which frankly isn't very much. And I know there are exceptions to this. I know there are anaesthetists, for example, that earn $250,000 or 300k a year. But if you walk around a hospital that's outside of a major city like London, where the pay is significantly higher, across most of the UK, excluding those extra high-paid, high-cost of living areas, okay, you're going to find that your average doctor earns 150k a year. And right out the gate, if you think that's a lot of money, you are conditioning and training your mind to accept that if you can get anywhere close to 150k, you're doing well in life, okay? So here's where this gets kind of interesting. By training your mind, or rather by rewiring your mind to understand what is a lot and what isn't a lot, you unlock a higher ceiling for your potential income. So what I'm saying here is, if you think 150k is a lot of money right now, and don't get me wrong, this is not me trying to say that that's not a lot of money, right? I understand the average wage in the UK is like $27,000. So 150k is significantly higher than that, right? But it still begs the question, doesn't it? Why is it that doctors earning 150k a year don't drive Lamborghinis? And so to use the Lamborghini as an example, right? Let's just say a Lambo cost £250,000, okay? One that's a couple of years old. That 150k, okay, really, after tax, national insurance, pension contributions, which for the NHS is mandatory at about 6 or 7%, and about 9% goes to the student loan company, really, that 150k immediately becomes somewhere in the neighborhood of 80k. And so, needless to say, if they don't spend any money at all, okay, £250,000 divided by their 80k means if they don't have any bills, they don't spend any of their wage whatsoever, they don't have to eat, then it's going to take them about 3 years to save for a Lambo. And so you think, well, okay, they could probably still afford it, right? If they just saved up, if they lived within their means for a while, whatever, if they made some sacrifices. But here's the reality. To insure a Lamborghini in a year is going to cost you anywhere from 7.5k to 15k per year in the UK, depending on how clean your license is and whether you live in a high risk or a low risk area. You're also going to need to budget 20k a year at least to maintain it. And you really need to have another 20 or 30k a year just in case the thing goes bang, okay? If it's a Lambo, you can maybe expect it to blow up once a year. If it's a Ferrari, it might be twice a year, okay? So let's just call the insurance 10k a year, and let's assume the thing doesn't blow up at all, right? And keep in mind, I'm not really including things like the GPS subscription that you're not going to be able to get it insured without. I'm also not including things like you're probably going to eat 2 sets of tires a year, because tires just aren't designed to handle 700-800 brake. They're just not, and you're not going to, unless you're going to drive it around everywhere at 30 miles an hour in 6th or 7th gear, then you are going to eat 2 sets of tires a year. I'm not even including that, okay? This is just, I would say, the bare minimum you need to have as a budget to run one of these supercars. Given that this doctor or lawyer or whatever has got 80k after tax, and it's going to cost them about 30k a year to run one of these cars, I've also not included obviously things like tax or fuel, which by the way, you can get it £1 a mile when you're putting your foot down in one of these things. Are they likely to get paid 80k a year and then budget 30 of that just for keeping a Lambo parked somewhere in your garage where you can only drive it a handful of days a year because the potholes are insane? You can't drive them in the wet. And so hopefully you can see now, right, that this is why doctors and lawyers and stuff don't drive Lamborghinis, right? Apart from the absolute top of the top of the top. It's actually because 150k a year, whilst we might perceive that as a lot of money, is not a lot of money. And to take this one step further, okay, say you wanted to buy a 60 or a 68 foot yacht for around £2 million. Well, again, after tax, you can see we've already got a problem, right? How are you going to turn your 80k before you've paid for your house, put food on the table, paid your bills, everything else? How many years is it going to take you to save 2 million quid? Okay. And you could, of course, yeah, you can invest some of this money. I know, I understand. But again, to illustrate this point, why is it doctors don't have yachts? Okay. A lot of people don't know this, but if you were going to have a £2 million yacht, you would be looking at somewhere between 150 to 180k a year to maintain this thing. Okay, to keep it at a cheap marina is going to cost you around 60k a year. And if you want it at more of a prestigious or a more convenient marina, you're probably going to be paying double that. So you might be paying over 100k a year just to keep the thing tied up at a marina in Southampton or Poole. And so if we are in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 60 to 120k a year just to keep the thing tied up at the docks, okay, then what you can see immediately is what society and what we tend to think of as a lot of money, okay, is simply not enough, okay? It's simply not enough to live truly in abundance. And so what's the point I'm making here, okay? It goes all the way back to what I was just reading you from here, okay? The rich know that creative thinking is the highest paid skill. Independent creative thinking is our most valuable asset. And so the reason I'm mentioning this, right, the reason all of this is super important is because all the while you think a certain amount a year is a lot, then it is a lot in your world. You are conditioning yourself, you are capping your mind, you are putting a ceiling on what you can possibly earn, because to you, making it is whatever that number is, okay? As soon as you start to realize, like I was just saying, that whatever you think is a lot of money, okay, is simply not a lot of money, then you free your mind to set off this psychological domino effect. Once you start to realize that people make that kind of money, 150k plus, every few weeks, okay? Many people, I would consider to be really rich, make millions a month, multiple millions a month. And if you can train your brain to understand just how much money is money, and instead of focus on, well, how am I going to get that, understand that your mind is capping you and preventing you from getting to that level, then you will indeed set off a psychological domino effect. And so I would encourage you to play around with this. And I understand that not everyone wants a yacht, not everyone wants a Lambo, okay? But that's not the point. All I'm saying is, ask yourself a few questions, right? Ask yourself, first of all, how much is a lot of money? Is what you consider a lot of money enough to give you the things that you want? I would also suggest putting a focus on mindfulness, okay? The more you start to be aware of any limiting thoughts that come into your mind, the more you start to notice actively the doubts, the fears, the uncertainty. And I'm not talking about crypto news or anything like that. I'm talking about noticing your mind is saying things like, yeah, well, that's just unrealistic. Well, I'm just never going to get there. How would I even achieve that? Okay. The more you start to train and program and condition your mind to not only have these thoughts, right, but notice you're having them and then let them go. And instead, focus your mind on understanding that money will come to you. Okay. Money will come to you so long as you can remove the ceiling, so long as you can stop painting yourself into a corner with, well, this is a lot of money, that's a lot of money. And the last thing I would say is understand that you do have an ability to transmute your thought into matter. If you lay in bed at night focusing on your power to tap into source, then you will be able to bring in a much, much, much higher ceiling, right? You are limiting your own level of abundance by keeping your mindset in a place that has a low ceiling. And this sentence is probably the most powerful one in all of this, okay? This sets off a psychological domino effect because once a person thinks and lives at a level of abundance, they know even greater levels of success are possible through the vehicle of creative thought, okay? The more you start to live in abundance, the more you start to realize that money has no value because it's so easy to attain, the higher and higher that ceiling becomes. So I'll leave you with this. The rich eventually figure out that training your mind to find solutions to difficult problems is the real secret to making money. The good news is it's possible for anyone who conditions their mind to think in this way and then transforms thought into action. Have a thought and then move in that direction. Do this consistently. Focus on holding your attention on the things that you want and completely ignoring the things that you do not want. And I can promise you, at least from my own experience, okay, this absolutely works. This absolutely works. Those examples I ran through about doctors never being able to afford things like Lamborghinis and yachts really put it into perspective that the entire game is rigged. Okay, the entire game is rigged. We essentially live in a communist society where everyone earns the same, and that same amount is not enough to get anyone the things that they want. So as soon as you realize, okay, that you are the problem, your mind is the problem, and that is the best news ever, because you can make an active decision to just choose to let go of all those limiting beliefs, then I promise you, you absolutely will notice massive, massive changes in your life. I personally have done this. I continue to be surprised by just how different avenues open up all the time. Different opportunities pop up in places I could never have even conceived. But it's because I don't put any of my attention on the how. I only know. I only know that it will continue. And again, the best thing you could ever do is train your mind to recognize that the ceiling is imposed. It is a self-imposed ceiling by the mind. So let me know what you think. I know this is not going to be for everyone, but I can tell you it worked for me. If anyone's had an experience like this, please, please, please do throw it down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If you are going to actively set out to do this and try to train and rewire or reprogram your brain, then please do keep me updated. I'd love to know how it goes for you guys. And in the meantime, I hope you're doing well. Until next time, cheers. Bye.